Hey everyone, since I saw really surprising results in one of my previous videos where I've tested all wattages for both GPD Win 5 versions with the Radeon 8050S version sometimes being actually faster than the potentially superior 8060S, I now wanted to publish another video testing a few more games with side-by-side content, though this time with only 3 different wattage settings, namely 17 watt, 35 watt and 75 watt. To be very clear, this video is not sponsored at all, and I bought both handhelds with my own money at gpd-minipc.com, where they are relatively cheap in comparison, while they will of course also be affected by the current RAM crisis. However, I was still able to get a discount code of $50 on your order at gpd-minipc.com if you want to try them out yourself with the code Hubwood. So make sure you'll use my link below in the comments or in the description. Keep in mind, they could temporarily be sold out right now. And for me, in Germany, the shipping took around 3 weeks. While I didn't have any issues with taxes, I didn't have to pay anything considering that for both packages, which have been sent in separate deliveries. So for today's tests, I reduced the active core count for both handhelds to only 6 cores, since in this video here, I found out that on average 6 cores gives us the best gaming experience over a wide range of games. So again, both devices you're seeing here are GPD Win 5s. Same chassis, same cooling, same 32GB memory configuration with the VRAM set to 8GB. The only important difference is the APU. Ryzen AI Max 385 versus AI Max+ 395. And in case you're wondering or complaining why I chose mostly medium or low graphic settings here, I wanted to see settings that gave us acceptable FPS at 17 watt. While these CPUs are strong and can handle mediocre settings and translate them into relatively high FPS at higher wattages, actually utilizing the 120 Hz of these screens here. And now without further ado, let's jump right into the benchmarks in alphabetical order. And at the end section of today's video, there will also be a summary with average FPS and a conclusion. Alright, and the first game for today is R-Graders using the medium preset with FSR on quality at 1080p. And at 75 watt, we are seeing that the difference is super small between the 8050S and the 8060S. Only 3% difference. That's nothing that you would actually notice. You can see that the temperature is about the same for both of them. The TDP is at a constant 75 watt. And the frame time graphs look pretty similar, 1% lows as well. So let's have a look at the next lower wattage step. At 35 watt, the difference is a bit bigger with 7% now, translating to 7 FPS in that case, but still it's very playable on both devices with 90 or 97 FPS. That's a good result in my opinion for 35 watt for an iGPU. And even with 6 cores only, for whatever reason, the 8050S with the AI Max 385 is a bit faster than the Ryzen AI Max+ 395. I mean, it's just about 6%, but still, it's not nothing. For Assassin's Creed Shadows, I was using the low preset because the game is super demanding, and using the 75 watt TDP, we're seeing 84 FPS for the 8050S and 90 FPS for the 8060S, a difference of around 7%. Once again, not that much. It's not like you would instantly notice the difference in the gameplay here. But once again, the game actually stays playable, at least with these settings, at the 35 watt TDP. Well, okay, we are using FSR on performance, so it better should. With 64 FPS on average for the 8050S over 69 FPS for the 8060S, which is a difference of 8% FPS-wise. But once again, it doesn't really make a huge difference, or it's not a game changer, you know. And last but not least, the 17 watt TDP for Assassin's Creed Shadows. And once again, the 8060S and the AI Max+ 395 are actually a bit slower here, which is a bit weird really, because both of them are reduced to 6 cores only. And next up is Cyberpunk 2077 using the medium preset with FSR on quality at 1080p. And with 75 watt TDP settings, we are seeing 127 FPS, pretty high, for the 8050S, and 137 FPS, which is a plus of, well, 8% for the 8060S. It's once again not a game changer. It's a bit bigger difference this time, but they're both really high numbers, to be honest, and it doesn't really matter. Using only 35 watt reduces the difference between the two to around only 3%, which is, well, that's nothing. That's almost within the margin of error. So 35 watt is something you'd probably use on the go for maximum performance while still getting some battery life. And at 17 watt, once again, the 8050S and the AI Max 385 are a tiny bit faster. I mean, okay, that's definitely within the margin of error, but still the much more expensive version isn't faster here. Over the course of all tested games, I actually saw the biggest difference in Counter-Strike 2. Here, using the 75 watt TDP setting for the low preset at 1080p, I saw a big difference of 15%. I mean, the biggest difference for the 75 watt TDP setting, with 311 FPS over 357 FPS. But that's at so high FPS numbers that, again, it doesn't even really matter. The displays can't display those high FPS anyhow, so, well, why bother? But you have to admit, these are pretty high FPS for a gaming handheld. And they still remain pretty high at 35 watt only, 245 FPS versus 310, an even bigger difference of 27%. But again, we're in such high FPS areas that it's just marginal. You won't notice the difference unless you're a super professional that really cares about input latency here. And CS2 was the only game where, even at the lowest 17 watt TDP setting for today's video, the 8060S and the AI Max+ 395 have been faster. 138 FPS versus 170 FPS, a difference of 23%. Probably noticeable to people that are very sensitive to that. I was testing Forza Horizon 5 with the high preset and MAX+ai by 2 at 1080p, and using the 75 watt TDP, I was only seeing a super tiny difference, almost within the margin of error of 4%, 148 FPS over 154 FPS for the 8060S. And once again, this is a difference that doesn't matter at all. But of course, perfectly playable on both devices. You could even use 1440p here, or turn up the settings to ultra easily and still get very playable FPS. And to be honest, this could even be played at 4K if you're attaching the devices to a 4K monitor. And even at 35 watt only, we're getting still very high and very playable FPS. 118 FPS for the 8050S on average, and 125 FPS, which is 6% more for the 8060S. Also, the 1% lows are very similar, and that's the case for pretty much all the games I've tested for today. And we're still getting more than 60 FPS on average, even at 17 watt only, where these handhelds aren't, well, performing at their best. So we're getting 70 FPS on average for the 8050S, which is a bit faster than the 68 FPS for the 8060S. Once again, it's a bit slower. I mean, the more expensive version. I was also testing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 using the medium preset with FSR on quality at 1080p, and saw very high average FPS of 109 for the 8050S and 115 FPS for the 8060S, which is an improvement of 6%. Once again, pretty similar to the games, to the other games we've seen today. And well, it's once more not really worth the extra money you have to pay for the more expensive version of this gaming handheld. And the difference shrinks to only 3% using the 35 watt TDP setting, 78 FPS on average versus 80 FPS on average, with very similar 1% lows for both of them. While the FPS drop below 60 FPS using the 17 watt profile, it still remains somewhat playable using the medium preset. 38 FPS on average for the 8050S. Once again, this is a bit faster here at 17 watt than the 8060S with only 36 FPS on average. I mean, it's not much, almost within the margin of error, but still, you can see it, it's repeatable and measurable. I also included the classic benchmark Shadow of the Tomb Raider using the medium preset at 1080p for very high average FPS at 75 watt.
122 FPS for the 8050S and 127 FPS for the 8060S, and the difference is only 4% here. I know you probably wouldn't play the game like this because you could easily use higher settings or ultra settings, but still I wanted to show that the CPUs can actually push out so much FPS that the GPU is still pretty much utilized. I mean, it's not at 100%, but still, it's pretty solid. And still very high FPS using the 35 watt profile, now 97 FPS on average for the 8050S and 100 FPS on average, which is only 3% more for the 8060S. And last but not least, at 17 watt, we're seeing an average of 50 FPS for the 8050S in Shadow of the Tomb Raider versus 48 FPS for the 8060S. And well, once again, this is a bit less FPS for the potentially faster APU. Please ignore the darker image on the right side for this test here. This is because of my capture card. Now for The Last of Us 2 with medium settings and FSR 3 set to balance at 1080p, I saw an average of 106 FPS for the 8050S using the AI Max 385 and only slightly faster 109 FPS for the 8060S and the Ryzen AI Max+ 395. And for the 35 watt profile, the FPS tanks a bit, but still playable 77 FPS for the 8050S and 80 FPS for the 8060S, which is only around 4% more in this case. And last but not least, the FPS drop below 60 FPS using the 17 watt profile, 42 FPS for the 8050S, which is actually 8% more than the 39 FPS, which I was seeing for the 8060S. Now, if we're taking a look at the averages of all tested games, we can see how small the average advantage of the 395 version really is. Yeah, it depends on the specific wattage, and in this video, testing all wattages wouldn't make sense, but at no point it's a really big difference. If we include the CS2 benchmark, which really stands out, at 17 watt the 8060S 395 combo is 4% faster. It's 11% faster at 35 watt TDP and 8% faster at a 75 watt TDP. And if we subtract the CS2 test, it's on average even slower at 17 watt. And according to my extended tests with all wattages for Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Cyberpunk 2077, that would be the case up until around probably 25 watt, which is an important TDP range for gaming handhelds considering, the battery life. And the average advantage at 35 and 75 watt would only be around 5%, at least for the games that I've tested for today's video. Might be a bit different with other games and other settings, etc. But overall, to be honest, I guess me and many others expected a bigger difference between the two. I guess for most people, the $400 extra are not justified if you'd use that machine for gaming only. So if you want to save some money, definitely go for the 8050S version without remorse. And that's all for today. In the next one, we'll probably take a look at how and if undervolting affects the FPS and the temperatures of these chips. Don't forget to like and or subscribe. Also, thanks a lot for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and tschüss.